On the 4th of November 2020, as the world's attention was focused on the US presidential elections, the Ethiopian government announced the start of a military offensive in Tigray, the country's northernmost province. Coming after months of tensions with the local government, the news raises the very real worry that Ethiopia, Africa's second most populous country, may now be sliding into civil war. So what exactly is the Tigray crisis, and just how worried should we be? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Kerr-Lindsay, and here I explore international relations, conflict, independence, and the origins of countries. Ethiopia is no stranger to conflict. From 1974 to 1991, it endured a particularly brutal civil war that in turn prompted a famine that left over 1.5 million people dead. However, in recent years, there's been a hope that the country was putting behind its bloody past and embarking on a new era of prosperity and development. According to the World Bank, the country's GDP grew by 9% in 2018-2019, one of the fastest growth rates in the world. Moreover, in 2019, the country's young Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed Ali, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to reach a border settlement with neighbouring Eritrea, which won its independence from Ethiopia in 1991. And yet, in truth, the country has never been entirely at peace. As well as a 2-year war with Eritrea in 1998 to 2000, for almost 25 years the country has fought ethnic Somali separatists of the Ogaden National Liberation Front, who fought to break away and establish an independent state in the east of the country, a conflict that was brought to an end with a peace agreement in 2018. Meanwhile, a half-century separatist conflict in another province, Oromia, appeared to continue despite a peace deal that had supposedly also been reached in 2018. In early November, the Oromo Liberation Army launched an attack against a village in the eastern Galiso district that left over 54 ethnic Amhara dead and sparked international condemnation. On top of this, there have been numerous cases of unrest elsewhere in the country. However, it's the government's announcement on the 4th of November 2020 that it had sent troops into Tigray following a dispute with the local government that has prompted particular concern amongst observers. As serious as the other insurgencies may be, the fighting in Tigray has the possibility to lead to a full-scale civil war in the country. So what are the origins of the current crisis, and why is it so dangerous? Ethiopia lies in East Africa. Landlocked, it's surrounded by Somalia to its east and Kenya to its south. Sudan and South Sudan lie to its west, and Eritrea and Djibouti to its north. It also shares a border with Somaliland to its northeast. At 1.1 million square kilometres, 425,000 square miles, it's the 27th largest of the 193 members of the United Nations. Its population stands at 115 million, making it the second most populous country in Africa after Nigeria. The largest single ethnic group are the Oromo, located in the central, southern and western parts of the country in a district known as Oromia. They represent approximately 35% of the population. Next come the Amhara. Centred around the northwest, they make up around 27% of Ethiopians. Then there are the Somalis and the Tigrayans. Located in the east and north of the country respectively, they each represent about 6% of the population. The remaining quarter of the population is made up of dozens of other ethnic groups. Overall, it's estimated that there are more than 80 distinct languages spoken in Ethiopia. The country has a long and rich history. In fact, it's one of the oldest countries in the world. Once known as Abyssinia, it managed to retain an essentially independent existence despite the European scramble for Africa in the 19th century. Indeed, it was one of only 4 African states alongside Egypt, Liberia and South Africa to be a founding member of the United Nations in 1945. The roots of the current tension lie in a long and protracted civil war that ravaged Ethiopia in the 1970s and 80s. Although a secessionist conflict had emerged in Eritrea in the early 1960s, the story really begins on the 12th of September 1974 when the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown by a military coup led by a Marxist faction in the armed forces. This in turn sparked a civil war as numerous movements sprang up to oppose the new regime. The most important of these was the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, which formed an alliance with a number of other anti-government forces, including the main Eritrean independence movement, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF. Although the fighting in Ethiopia and Eritrea continued throughout the 1980s, by the start of the 1990s, the rebel forces were gaining the upper hand. In late May 1991, rebel forces led by the TPLF seized control of the country's capital, Addis Ababa, and overthrew the governing regime. This led to a number of important changes in Ethiopia. Perhaps most notably, Eritrea now achieved independence. I've actually covered this in another video. I've put a link above and in the description below. At the same time, Ethiopia was reorganised along federal lines, officially becoming the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Also, and almost uniquely in the world, its new constitution explicitly permitted secession, even laying out a route for constituent parts to break away and become independent. Although the country was now nominally democratic, in truth it became a one-party state under the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, an alliance of 4 political groupings that included the TPLF. Tigrayans, despite representing just 6% of the population, took up dominant roles in the federal government, including the post of Prime Minister, a position held by Meles Zenawi from 1995 to 2012. However, all this changed in 2018. Following major protests, Abiy Ahmed Ali, an ethnic Oromo, assumed the leadership of the EPRDF. This soon led to tensions as Tigrayans now found themselves increasingly marginalised from a government and military that they had so long dominated. Meanwhile, concerns also grew that the new Prime Minister's calls for national unity were aimed at undermining the country's federal structure. To add to all this, although the new Prime Minister was considered to be a reformer, he soon began showing authoritarian tendencies, including harsh new measures on freedom of speech. The extent of the breakdown in relations became apparent when, in 2019, the EPRDF was dissolved and a new party was formed in its place, the Prosperity Party. Crucially, the TPLF refused to join. While there was clearly a range of factors that had sparked tensions between the government and the TPLF, the spur for the current confrontation appears to lie in a dispute over the timing of national and regional elections. Originally scheduled for August 2020, in March, the country's electoral body announced that they would have to be postponed due to the COVID pandemic. As a result, the government extended the mandate of lawmakers. However, this was rejected by the TPLF-controlled government in Tigray. Arguing that the move was further evidence of increasing authoritarianism by the central government, it went ahead and held regional elections in September. In the period that followed, relations between the federal government and the Tigray Regional Administration, neither of which now recognised the other as legitimate, quickly deteriorated as they fell into a series of escalating disputes. At the start of October, Tigray withdrew its representatives from the federal government institutions. Days later, the Ethiopian Upper House of Parliament voted to withhold budget subsidies to the Tigray regional state, prompting threats from the relatively prosperous region to withhold tax receipts to the central government. Then, an attempt by the federal government to reshuffle the military leadership in Tigray was effectively blocked when the Tigray administration prevented a senior military officer sent from Addis Ababa from assuming his post. However, the most serious incident came at the start of November when a federal military barracks in Tigray was attacked. Addressing the country, the Ethiopian Prime Minister accused the TPLF of having orchestrated the attack in an attempt to steal equipment. He then went on to state that while the federal government has used all means to thwart a military engagement against the TPLF, a war, however, cannot be prevented only on the goodwill and decision of one side, but on the mutual choice for peace by both parties. The last red line has been crossed with this morning's attacks, and the federal government is therefore forced into military confrontation. The Ethiopian National Defence Forces, under the direction of a command post, have been ordered to carry out their mission to save the country and the region from spiralling into instability. Just hours later, the Ethiopian government declared a 6-month state of emergency in Tigray amidst report of fighting in the region. At this stage, it's unclear exactly what is happening in Tigray or how it will develop. Significantly, the government appears to have shut down electricity, telephone and internet connections into Tigray, thus preventing a clear picture from emerging. But amongst regional and international observers, there's now a very real concern that this may in fact spark a full-scale civil war in the country that may even pull the country apart. What makes the situation particularly worrying is that Tigray is home to a large proportion of the country's troops and weaponry. Moreover, the TPLF maintains its own forces. This makes the possibility of a direct confrontation between Ethiopia and Tigray very different from the other armed insurgencies faced by the Ethiopian government. In the event that the conflict escalates, it has the potential to become extremely serious. As a result, there have already been widespread international calls for both sides to show restraint. As serious as this is in its own right, there will also be concerns that any escalation of fighting could have dramatic effects in other parts of Ethiopia. In addition, a serious conflict could have far wider effects. There will be fears that other neighbouring states, such as Eritrea, may also become involved. On top of this, there's an obvious humanitarian issue to consider, not only within Ethiopia, but regionally. Serious fighting could well lead to significant refugee outflows into neighbouring regions. This in turn could feed wider regional instability across the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is no stranger to conflict. However, the Tigray crisis marks a wholly more serious development for the country. While it's too soon to say where this is all going in any definitive manner, it clearly has the potential to become far more serious than other insurgencies the country has faced. Coming against the backdrop of growing tensions between the federal government and the TPLF, the formerly dominant force in Ethiopian politics, which still retains control of the Tigray region, it has the very real potential to spiral out of control and develop into a full-scale civil war. For all these reasons, the escalating tensions between Ethiopia and Tigray pose a very real threat to peace and security in Africa. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted when I post new videos. I upload new ones every Friday. Thanks so much for watching and see you in the next video.